This paper is entitled I'll Show and No No. Meaning like, yeah, people show up during learning, but they don't take much home. And it's actually a paper based on an experiment outside of an audit context. So people participate, go to the lab, participate in an online training, and then are doing a quiz about what they learned, but it's not audit related, the things they had to study. But we think we set up the experiment such that it looks like a context which you guys also experience in your audit firm. You have to participate in these online modules, you have to learn certain stuff, and after that you have to prove that you master the knowledge into a sort of online test. And that's a little bit the environment that we are looking at. Is this relevant? Well, if you look at knowledge organizations, 85% of the CEOs say actually that they are implementing employee learning programs. In every organization, you see them popping up, especially in knowledge organizations. So professional service organizations often attach a high value to them, consider learning as a competitive advantage, and especially things that evolve quite a lot, like auditing. Even now, like ESG, new things come up, AI, cybersecurity. These things then are often introduced also in online learning modules. We do see that this online learning, well, it's a nice thing, but there's also a lot of criticism. If you ask people in organizations, this doesn't come from the audit world, by the way. Maybe people in audit are more satisfied. But here in a regular firm context, 75% of the respondents say like, yeah, I'm actually dissatisfied with all these things that I have to do online. And other people say like, yeah, learners have reported forgetting, saying like, yeah, I studied this, but the day after I actually don't know what I learned. Not retaining enough knowledge, and also not enough follow-ups after completion. So you completed this module and then nothing else happens. And then people say, yeah, why do I do this? Because it's not followed up by my supervisor. My supervisor only cares whether I have the certificate, not whether I have the knowledge, for example. And that could lead to dysfunctional effects. And you could say, well, that doesn't happen in audit firms because, yeah, we have all well managed, but reality bites actually. If you look at in the news, here is JP Morgan, that's not an audit firm. Well, here they had to fire 10 analysts for cheating on this online test. Goldman Sachs also fired analysts for cheating. But also in auditing, California Accounting Board fines KPMG for 1.3 million for a big cheating scandal where colleagues exchanged answers with each other, I think. Was it exchanging answers?
Yeah.
And so because of the exchanged answers, nobody actually studied and they passed the examination things. You can say in the Netherlands it doesn't happen. Well, recently in October, there was the news of Deloitte that also accountants cheated during their exams where they had to study material, and also, I don't know whether there was also exchanging of answers of people telling, well, this and this, if you do this, then you can easily pass the exam. So these things happen. So that actually suggests that, well, people might show up in these online trainings, but they don't always retain knowledge. Even worse, they sometimes find shortcuts to avoid learning, but still have the certificate. Look, I completed this and I did it very well. I got 90% out of 100. But in the end, if you ask them, well, what did you study? They actually have to say, I don't know. And this can be dangerous, especially in the audit world where, for example, the idea was to learn a lot about this IFRS, a lot about legislation, or a lot about the CSRD. And then you go to a client, you did this way, yeah, you don't have actually the knowledge that might be relevant, for example, in this ESG context. This is a key concept for learning and engaging in ineffective learning. So you can have two types of motivation to learn. The first one is like, yeah, I really want to master this thing. And I really want to know and want to improve my knowledge, which is actually the example that Jan sketched earlier. I now need it for my profession, and I really want to master this because I know that I have to need it the next day. The other one is more the performance orientation. The example of my son failing, or people saying, no, I scored very well. I really want to score well against other people. So I'm going to go for as many modules at high passing rates, and I want to shine against my colleagues. Then you have more this performance orientation in your learning. And that can be triggered by different things in the environment. One thing we suspect in this paper is that if you make things transparent, then people don't want to look badly against their colleagues. They might even want to look like, hey, I'm the guy that always scores 100% out of 100. And so I'm going to focus more on this performance orientation. How can I achieve it? Well, if I get 100 out of 100, I really have to study very, very, very hard. Or you see something, here is a shortcut, a colleague has the answers. That's also a way if I give the answers in the system, and then I shine too by by putting answers that I learned from my colleague. And that's the option that we also give to people in the experiment. So people can study, or they can find a shortcut and then actually don't study the materials, but still get high scores in the exam. Our hypothesis that we want to test is that outcome transparency engages this propensity to use the shortcut, because we think, well, this learning achievement, so doing well, and then this performance orientation will help people to shine in that competition. And because of that shining, they are more likely to do the cheating kind of thing in this test. How can we mitigate this? Well, another thing that the literature on education and psychology says is like two elements. This perceived autonomy, like what you suggested, plus curiosity. Can we spark this learning depending on adaptive learning? So maybe because I can self-direct, I can see that I'm fed with relevant things that really matter to me. I get this curiosity going. If I really have this curiosity, I take a different orientation. I'm not going to focus less on this performance, more on, I really want to know this kind of thing. And that's what we built into with personalization. We think you will get more of this curiosity effect. And that curiosity effect might have a direct effect on using the ineffective option, but also indirectly by triggering this master orientation. The lesson for practice: try to focus more on what can we do to get this mastery going instead of this performance orientation.
And what we find is actually very interesting and consistent with our expectation is that you can see this blue bar. They are actually, so this bar is about the ineffective learning or the use of alternative option, as I just shown, that if you click this alternative option, you just get the answer. You just buy the answer, and you just don't really learn the stuff. And in this standardized path, as we can see, when we move from non-transparency to transparency condition, the alternative option or ineffective learning actually increase drastically from 0.36 to 0.5. However, if we actually look at this green bar, which is about outcome in this personalized path, you actually see it's quite stable. And even when the transparency is introduced, you don't really see people cheat more or people use this alternative option more. And to summarize the implication of our research, from the academic perspective, the key message is that this outcome transparency in learning program, even though proposed by some practitioners, can actually have this dysfunctional effect. It actually triggers more performance orientation, thinking that I'm just learning because I want to complete something. However, the learning path, if we can do it in a more personalized way, can actually moderate this undesirable impact introduced by this outcome transparency, because it unlocks curiosity, which shifts people back towards more mastery orientation when they are perceiving the purpose of learning. And because this mastery orientation, where curiosity plays such an important role, so it is very important for companies to think about how to better promote this mastery orientation. And if we're talking about more practical implication, even though we are looking at the outcome transparency, for example, the linking message or the leaderboard, or some other kind of congratulation message of learning outcomes, the construct can also be extended to the pressure to perform well, right? Because that is actually the higher level construct here. And besides the outcome transparency, you can also think about, oh, if my learning outcome is somehow monitored by my supervisor, my boss, my department head, and in that way, I still have a higher pressure to perform well. Or in some other context, the learning department decide to set a very strict deadline for this learning module and the next learning module. And that kind of deadline can also introduce this kind of pressure to really perform well. And we actually delivered a message that this pressure to perform well indeed works in a way that more people finish, but not really in the desirable way, right? It actually triggers this performance orientation and more use of ineffective learning strategy. However, it does not mean that firms should not use any of these tools. Firms can still use these tools if they can find ways to motivate mastery orientation or spark curiosity. So, and also, since we talk about this perceived competence improvement, that also means that this kind of ineffective learning, even though it's just a learning outcome, could have far-reaching consequence on some other task performance. For auditors, that might be audit quality.